Hi, I'm Kathy from Eclectic Images and welcome to part 2 of getting started with stamping. So in this video today we're going to carry on from where we finished last time with a few more colouring effects on our stamps using different stamp pads. So we're going to start off inking up our stamp with our VersaFine ink pad. This is the one that dries to a waterproof finish, and we're working on the cotton blend cardstock again so that we can do some watercolouring effects. So remember, take your ink pad to your stamp, pop your stamp onto your page and press down. Don't let go of it. Just press down evenly, hold your paper and lift your stamp straight up and you should get a really good image. Now if you're finding you're not getting a good image, it could mean that your ink pad is a little bit dry. Now some ink pads it happens to quicker than others, but a lot of ink pads you can actually buy a re-inker for them. And this way you haven't got to go and buy a new ink pad if your ink pad gets a bit dry. Now it happens that I've just got a re-inker here for my Catherine Pooler black, so I'll show you doing that. So let's just take the lid off the ink pad, lid off our re-inker. So you get many re-inks for an ink pad out of your bottle of re-inker. So we just squeeze that on. You can see how it's sucking it up quite easily. And then you can just use the nozzle to actually just work that into the ink pad. Or you can actually use a scraper tool, like a plastic scraper, or even the edge of a credit card, just to wipe that into the pad. But I often find just the nozzle is enough. And then our ink pad's ready to go. As you saw, I didn't put a lot of ink on, so you get, as I said, many inks out of a re-inker. So you don't despair. If your ink pad is not behaving itself properly and it feels like it's a little bit dry, don't do what I've heard someone do before when they threw the ink pads out. You can just get your re-inker and go from there. Some don't, but most ink pads will have re-inkers available. Okay, so on our butterfly here that we've just stamped, we're going to do some different colouring methods. I'm actually going to use the Kaleidocolor ink pads to colour. Whereas last time we were working more with pencils and textures to do our colouring, this time we're going to work with inks. So with your Kaleidocolor ink pad, you don't have to push it together this time. We're just going to press it down onto an acrylic block. Now just make sure that because you've got that little bit there that's raised, that is past the block. Otherwise it'll stop the colours reaching the block properly. So make sure it's past the block before we actually just press that ink pad onto our acrylic block, and we've made ourselves a paint palette. Remember I was talking about ink pads that are water soluble compared with waterproof. So our waterproof ink is our black that we've done our butterfly. Our colours are water soluble or water reactive. Now we're just going to add in also, we could do the same effect with our distress ink pads. Pop those onto our block. And we could also do the same sort of thing with something like our Catherine Pooler ink pads. So I'm just going to pop that one onto the block as well. So any of these inks will work really well as a paint. So now I'll just grab my water brush, which we introduced in the last video, just making sure I have got it nice and clean. And then we can just pick up some ink and start painting. Now again, similar to when we were working with our watercolour pencils and things on our cotton blend cardstock, we can actually have our colours, you can drag them out to drag your colour across, but if I clean my brush, I can actually push those colours back if I don't want them as strong. So you can actually manipulate your colours around. We can also just go between the colours to blend them. And let's add a little bit more pink down here. So drag it out or push it back, whichever direction you want that extra colour to go in. Now I'm just going to go into a little bit of the purple colour down the base of the wing there. Now you can see, we can now see a line where the purple and the pink are meeting. So I'll just clean my brush and just go between the two until they blend nicely in together. So you can see our inks just blend beautifully together. We're just going to go up to the Catherine Pooler one here and pick up some blue and blend that into our other colours as well. So again, just clean your brush and just blend between them. I might add a little bit of purple just where those two colours are meeting. Clean my brush, just blend between those two, blend between my pinks and my purples. And you can see I'm getting a richer colour where I'm layering colour over the top of a previous one. It's giving me a richer tone to it. Let's just... And you'll also notice that I just turn the card around, so I'm always working at an angle that's comfortable for me. Just look where we've got any lines that need to be blended out. You can see how relaxing and how lovely it is to do, that you can just sit there and just paint away. Now on this side we're going to start with our blue. Actually, I'm just going to add a little bit of this blue in there as well. May as well try and use all the colours I've got laid out there. Pop some of this one on. And we're going to head more into our aqua tones. So lay it on where we want it. And then overlap those colours to blend them. Then create beautiful layered colours. Really lovely effects. Okay, now to make our background for this one, I'm going to show you a couple of different things that we can do. One of them is using the same ink pad. One of them is actually going to be colouring with our marker pens, except I've realised I've really got the wrong, I've got a lavender stamp and I've got red and pink textures here on the go, but that's what I've got, so that's what I'm going to go with. Okay, so we could, with our lavender, we can colour with our textures directly onto our stamp. Yeah, pink lavender, can't you? Hope so. So I'm actually colouring right out to the edges of the petals with the stamp, with the marker. Now, as you can see, this is where I'm using the bullet end. I wouldn't want to do this with that end unless I was really careful, because I wouldn't want to damage that brush tip. So I'm just going to get some of the deeper red and just add some extra colour in the centre of the flower. And I'm going to be a little bit sneaky and try and add some ink. Actually, I'll use our chalk ink pad from before. And we're just going to try and add a little bit of green directly with the ink pad here. This is where sometimes having a little ink pad can be really cool. So now we can stamp that onto our card. Now, if it's been sitting there for a few minutes, particularly with the area done with the texture, if you actually just breathe on it, it reactivates the inks and you'll get another inking out of it. We can actually do several and get several different generations. If you find you've even, I mean, this is a fairly small stamp, but if I'd been inking up a larger stamp, and I will actually try this one huffing on it straight away and see if we get a little bit stronger. I may have taken too long with my inking. So add some texture back onto it again. Add a bit of red down the middle there. Bit of green on our base. Now this time I'm going to huff on it before I stamp it the first time. See if we get one a bit stronger. So depending on how long it takes you to get all the inks onto the stamp, you may need to blow on it the first time, but certainly to get repeated stamping, just huff on it just to reactivate the inks, particularly with the dye inks, this works. And but then you can get these multiple images, so we can create, like we've got lavender bushes there growing. So that's using your marker pens directly onto the stamp, and that can be great if you've got a stamp such as the lavender where I've got areas that need to be one colour and areas that need to be another colour. The other thing we can do, and this is getting the full use out of these gorgeous Collider colour pads. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you push it together, it becomes a multicolour pad. So with our stamps, and I'm using our butterfly background here, don't ever ink your stamp up I'm going to face this towards the camera. Don't ever ink it up across that way, because that will just muddy all these colours in together and you'll just end up with a murky grey brown. Always ink across. But you can ink across with your stamp on whatever angle you like, as long as you're going that way. So I'm going to ink this one mainly on this end, the more purpley blues and greens, and we're going to ink across our pad. And I can see there's a few little fronds on the end there that I've missed, so I'm just going to grab those with that green on the end there, and let's stamp this out. And again, we can also stamp this several times and get what we call the second generation stamping, and so it's going to be softer each time as we stamp. So we've got our first image is strong, and then it's fading off to softer, so that's doing second generation stamping. So it's stamping without re-inking. Now I'm going to ink it up another time. I'll give it a bit of a clean, just in case I don't ink it up on exactly the same part of the ink pad. Let's ink up. And then I'm just going to bring some in across the top here. Okay, so again, not using the whole image of the stamp, just using part of it, which will creates a really good look to be sort of going off the edge of your card. Now just separate those out again, and with our small acrylic block, which I've now managed to hide underneath something else, there we go, under the lavender, I'm going to pick up some tiny little flowers and add some extra foliage around here. So let's pick up some of this pink. Check that. No, I'm going to go with the softer pink first. This one right on the end. So with a little stamp, I can just fit it right on that one colour and just stamp as many of those as I like. Now give that one a clean, and I've got a couple of little flowers here ready to go. Stick another little stamp on. Ink up with the next colour. And like the background stamp, it can look good if your main other stamps go off the edge of the card as well. Let's switch to our last little flower that we're going to use today and pick up some of the purple. Now you can see with these ones, this is quite a firm ink pad, and it's such a little stamp that I am taking the stamp to the ink pad and just tapping on it. And this is where sometimes it's really hard to know when to stop. You can just keep going, and then sometimes you go, yeah, I probably should have stopped a couple of flowers ago. But no, we're having fun. Now I'm going to, with the same ink pad, now last time I did some shading around the edge with a brush, a big brush. So the shading brushes I like to use mostly are these ones, which are called a future brush, a future round brush, and I can pick up some of the pink with that and just shade around the edge there of the card. So we can smudge, we can do circles. There is another type of brush that you can use as well that's very popular at the moment, and that's more of like a makeup foundation brush. So I'm just going to pick up one of these. So this has, again, nice rounded bristles, so you don't get, and very dense bristles, so you don't get brush marks. And you can pick up some colour with that, and we can just, again, shading from our scrap paper and circling onto the card, and just blend some background colour on with that. There are other blending tools that you can use, but I usually find the brushes are a nice way to get a really soft finish to it. Just add a little bit more around that side. And I will do some other cards in other videos where I'm using these to create more blended background effects, but you'll see those at other times. The other little thing that we can do is we can actually swipe the edge of our card to create a stronger background. So I'm just going to grab my card and just run it along the edge of that ink pad, and you'll see we get a stronger line happening. Let's use the pink across the top. So you see we get a stronger border. So that's something that's really nice for finishing off your cards as well. So once we've got to that point, let's layer this one up. So I'm going to show a couple of different ways of actually layering onto your background card. So I've got a piece here. So I can see what sort of a border I've cut that to. Now I'm going to use double-sided tape on the back of this. You could also use a tape runner or a glue. But we're just working here with a double-sided tape. So let's lay it down. And a nice way to finish off your tape is just grab that acrylic block and just pull against it, and you'll get a nice cut edge to the tape without having to fiddle around with scissors. So I'm just pressing it down. Now when we've already cut our background card to size, one really good way of helping to position it and get all your edges straight is to not actually lift off all of your double-sided tape at once. So what we're going to do is just lift off the one bit at the end, and then we'll lift these ones off, but only go about halfway with them. So we'll go down halfway and then fold it out to the side. Do the same on this end. Get our tape started. Go about halfway and fold it out to the side. So this way we can actually use this end that still has the backing on the tape to actually lay on our card and work out where our borders were and get our card nice and straight. And it's not sticking, I can still move it around. So I'll get my borders right, lay my card down, and now this end is the sticky one. So that's now going to hold it in place for us while we very carefully don't forget to lift out the top bit of tape. And then with our sides, we're just going to pull those out. And then we can work from our bottom, which we know is right, and work our way up, and we should get our borders pretty even and nice and straight. So that's one way of making sure that we get our card layered right. Another way, and this is one that I did earlier, here's one I prepared earlier. So we're just going to take the backing off that. And in this case, I've actually got my backing card a bit larger than what I need. So what I'm going to do is actually lay it in one corner. So this way I'm just looking at that edge and this edge and getting those straight. I'm not worrying about my other two sides. So I'll lay it down with those ones straight. And then I can use something like a guillotine or a knife. So I'm just going to grab a cutting board and a metal ruler and a nice sharp craft knife, being very careful handling the blade. And I can look at what my border is there. I could use the grid on the cutting mat if I wanted to, or I can just line it up by eye. So just looking that I'm creating the same border around, and then slice that off with my craft knife. Like that. Or we could have used a small guillotine. Or paper trimmer. Now I'm just going to pop it into my trimmer to start with and have a look at where my card comes. So what I'm doing is I'm lining it up with the edge of the trimmer and just on my guide looking at where the pattern card's coming to. So then I can turn my card around and get that much pattern card showing, and that way my border should cut to about the same width if I've lined it up right. So I hold down with the guides there and slice, and again we get a nice even border. Now the last thing I'm going to show, what I've done with this one is I've done a little bit more embellishment. So we'll just add that into this card. So this is using products like Stickles, Liquid Pearls. So there's a couple of different brands of glitter glues and pearl type things. These are the two that I happen to work with. So with our Stickles glitter, we can actually just add it in some drops. I'm just going to have my scrap paper so I can get that started. That's it, make sure it's flowing nicely. Okay, so we can do it in drops. Or we can actually just put it on and use the nozzle to actually spread it out so we get just a very fine amount of glitter. We can do sort of flicks and swirls with it, following our stamp lines. Go around our edges, whatever we prefer. So I'm just using the nozzle just to spread that glitter out so we get so here we've done it quite thick, it looks quite jewel-like, or you can spread it out and get it thin. Now our liquid pearls, again I'm just going to go on my scrap paper just to make sure that it's flowing. Yep. Okay, so our liquid pearls, we normally do those as little dots. And if you try and touch the paint to your card rather than the nozzle, you tend to get more control over the size of your dots. So again, we can do little random spots, or we can follow our pattern on our card. But we can also, with our pearls, we can also do some just random swirls. So I'm just going to follow the swirling line of the antenna there and just randomly add a few swirls there. We might follow the tail down that way. So we can just add some extra little random little swirly bits if we want to. So that's ways that you can use your pearls, either for some random swirls or some different lovely little pearly dots. So that's different ways that you can embellish your card. We could also add on some stick-on gems. They look really pretty, particularly on butterflies and flowers. So yeah, we can just dress our card up a little bit more that way. So that takes us through some more of our basic techniques, using your multicolour pads, painting with your inks, so just giving you a few more ideas. So thank you for joining us on the journey that's been getting started in stamping. Hopefully that gives you some tips and techniques to get started. And there's another technique that we use a lot in stamping, which is called embossing, and we cover that in another video called Basic Embossing, or Embossing Basics. So again, we'll put the link to that at the base of this video so you can follow the journey through. And then from there, we've got lots of other videos showing different stamping techniques just to take you in other directions with backgrounds and different colouring methods, etc. So hopefully you've enjoyed this and can see how you could do this as a hobby, and I hope you join us to do more stamping. Thank you.